The silent despair the galaxy was silent, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of despair. Stars burned cold in the distance, but for those who lived on the small outposts and scattered colonies, there was no comfort in their light. The enemy had swept through system after system, leaving nothing but ashes and broken promises behind. Every signal for help had gone unanswered. Every call had returned only static. The allies who once stood tall together now hid behind shattered defenses, waiting for the end. On one small colony world near the edge of known space, the people watched the horizon with fear. They had seen the enemy ships blot out the sky. They had felt the ground tremble under bombardments. Their leaders told them to remain strong, but their eyes betrayed the truth. Hope was dying, slowly, painfully, like a candle fading in the wind in orbit. The last defense fleet of the Allied worlds was breaking. Their ships were old, their weapons weak. Their crews exhausted. They had fought bravely for weeks. But bravery was not enough. The enemy outnumbered them, outgunned them, and now outmatched them in every way. The commanders knew the battle was lost, yet they refused to surrender. They fought on not for victory but for honor, and for the slim chance that someone, somewhere might hear their struggle. The enemy knew this as well. Their commanders mocked the Allied ships, calling them relics of a forgotten age. Where is your human aid now? They laughed over intercepted channels. Where are the war fleets you once boasted about? You are alone, abandoned and broken. Their words were like knives, cutting deeper than any weapon. For the truth was that the humans had been silent. No warships had come. No signals had been answered. Humanity, the one force the galaxy had once whispered about in fear, seemed to have vanished into the void. On the ground, families huddled in shelters. Alien children cried in the arms of their parents. Soldiers stood at checkpoints with weary eyes, their armor dented, their weapons low on charge. Each of them wondered the same thing: why had humanity not come? Had Earth abandoned them? Or was humanity destroyed already, consumed by the same darkness now falling on them? These questions burned louder than the enemy's guns. Among them was an alien captain named Reinar. He had fought alongside humans long ago, in a war that reshaped the stars. He remembered their fire, their defiance, their unyielding spirit. He remembered standing beside a human warship as it tore through enemy fleets like a storm. But that was many years ago, and now he felt only emptiness. Perhaps humanity was nothing but a legend now, a fading story told to keep allies brave. Reinar bowed his head and whispered a silent prayer, not to gods, but to the memory of humans, that they might rise again. In the command center of the last orbital station, alarms screamed, screens flickered red with warnings. Shields down, weapons failing, multiple hull breaches, the crew cried. The commander, an old alien with tired eyes, knew what was coming. He gave one final order. Hold the line as long as you can. His voice trembled, but his spirit did not break. If they were to die, they would die fighting. The enemy fleet closed in, vast and merciless. Their ships burned with cruel light. Thousands of weapons locked on the dying station. The end seemed certain. The enemy prepared their final strike, and the Allied soldiers braced themselves for death. Yet deep in the void, far beyond their sensors, something stirred. It was faint at first, like a ripple in the ocean of stars, a low hum, a vibration in the silence. No one noticed it. No one could believe such a thing could exist after all this time. But it was there, growing stronger with each moment. Back on the ground, Captain Reinar stood alone outside the shelter. He looked to the sky, and for a brief second, he thought he heard it, a sound so faint he almost dismissed it as wind. But there was no wind in space. It was not natural, it was mechanical. Purposeful, it was a howl. The enemy fleet prepared to fire. Their commanders grinned, eager for the kill. They believed victory was certain. They believed no aid would come. But in the blackest corner of the void, hidden in shadows where no light dared to reach, a shape began to move. Slowly, silently, it emerged. Its hull scarred from ancient battles, its engines burning with a strange and terrifying glow. It was not a myth, it was not a story, it was the enemy's triumph. The battlefield above the colony world was burning. Allied ships drifted like broken bones across the void. Fire spilled from ruptured engines, and debris rained down like stars falling from heaven. For the enemy fleet, it was a scene of glory. Their commanders stood tall in their warships, proud and certain that this would be remembered as their day of triumph. On the command bridge of the enemy flagship, Admiral Kravos watched with cold satisfaction. His crimson eyes gleamed as his officers cheered. "The Allies are finished," one declared. "Their shields are gone, their weapons are dust. Soon the last station will break apart." Kravos allowed himself a rare smile. To him, this was not only victory, it was domination. Proof that his people were destined to rule the galaxy. "Signal the fleet," Kravos ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. "Crush what remains, leave no survivors. Make the galaxy see what happens when they defy us." His officers bowed their heads in obedience. The order spread through the fleet like fire through dry grass. Enemy ships surged forward, sleek and merciless. They cut through the Allied lines with ease, their cannons lit up the darkness, tearing apart hulls, ripping through steel. Each explosion was followed by laughter. They had fought against humans once long ago, and they remembered that war as their greatest fear. But now, with humanity silent, they believed they were invincible. "Where are your saviors?" Kravos taunted over the open channel, his words broadcasted to every surviving ally ship. "Where are the humans you begged for? They will not come, they have abandoned you. You will die alone." His voice carried across the void like poison, and for a moment even the strongest hearts wavered. On the Allied station, the crew heard his voice and trembled. Some cursed in anger, others wept quietly. They had hoped until now that maybe, just maybe, a miracle would come. But the enemy admiral's words seemed final. For what else could they believe when death loomed so close? The enemy ships circled the station like predators. They fired in careful bursts, savoring the kill rather than ending it quickly. Each impact shook the station, lights flickering, bulkheads groaning. The crew struggled to keep systems alive, but everyone knew they were simply delaying the inevitable. On the ground, the colony civilians saw the fire streak across the sky. Their world shook under distant detonations. Alien children pressed their faces against their parents. Asking if this was the end, soldiers tried to remain strong. But even they whispered among themselves, "No one is coming. It is over." Admiral Kravos stood proudly at the center of his bridge. "This is our moment," he declared. "We will show the galaxy that resistance is useless. From this day forward, only our will shall command the stars." His officers roared in agreement. Their fleet moved in perfect formation, pressing harder, faster, more brutal with each strike, yet not all in the enemy fleet shared the admiral's arrogance. On one of the smaller destroyers, a young officer stared at his sensor readings. Confusion twisted across his face. "Admiral," he whispered to himself, though his words would never reach Kravos. "There is something strange in the void." He checked again, but the reading was faint, almost hidden. Perhaps it was an error. Perhaps it was nothing. Still, unease gnawed at him. The admiral, however, did not see or care. To him, the victory was absolute. "Ready the final barrage," he ordered. "I want that station broken into dust. Fire on my command." Weapons across the fleet charged. Glowing like a second dawn in the darkness, every Allied crew member held their breath. Waiting for the end inside the shelters on the colony, Captain Reinar closed his eyes. He felt the tremors of the bombardment above. He thought of the humans he once fought beside. He thought of the warships that once howled like wolves across the stars. And he whispered again, "If you still live, if your fire still burns, we need you now." The enemy fleet moved into perfect alignment. Their guns aimed as one, their victory already written in their minds. Admiral Kravos raised his hand, ready to give the command, and then, just as silence fell for the final breath before destruction, the strange hum returned. It was louder now, strong enough that even some of the enemy ships detected it. A vibration cut through the void, faint but undeniable. "Admiral?" an officer called nervously. "We are detecting an anomaly at the edge of the sector." Kravos narrowed his eyes. Annoyed, "Ignore it," he snapped. "There is nothing left in this region but ghosts. Fire on my mark." But the hum grew again, turning into a low howl that carried across the void. Every sensor caught it now. Every ship heard it. The enemy crew shifted uneasily, glancing at one another. The Allied crews looked up in shock, eyes wide with sudden impossible hope. Kravos clenched his fist, anger boiling in his chest. "It is nothing," he insisted. "Fire now." But in that moment a shadow stirred in the dark, and even the admiral's voice could not silence the fear rising in his fleet. A human warship. Whispers of the void. The hum became a tremor in the silence of space. It rolled through the void like a heartbeat that had been sleeping for too long. At first it was faint, only a whisper among the endless stars. But soon it grew louder, heavier, carrying with it a weight that made even veteran soldiers feel unease. On the battered orbital station, the crew froze. Their screens flickered as sensors strained to understand the source. "Energy spike detected," one officer gasped. "Sector 4. Deep in the shadow of the nebula. The commander turned his weary eyes toward the display. His heart raced, though his mind warned him not to hope. "Is it one of ours?" he asked. The officer shook his head. "Unknown. The signature is unlike anything recorded in decades, down on the colony." The frightened civilians huddled together. The ground quaked from the orbital battle. Children wept, soldiers whispered prayers, but among them Captain Reinar lifted his head. His sharp ears caught something faint. A vibration carried through the earth. It was not the enemy's fire, it was not bombardment. It was something deeper, something alive. He stepped out from the shelter and stared into the black heavens. His chest tightened. "No," he whispered. "It cannot be. The enemy fleet, so confident moments ago, now shifted restlessly on the flagship." Admiral Cravo slammed his clawed fist against the console. "Report!" he barked. His officers scrambled. "Sir, unidentified energy surge." One stammered. "It's powerful but unstable. Origin unknown," Cravo snarled. "I told you." "It is nothing but debris and echoes. Do not falter now. Prepare to fire." Yet even as he spoke, the hum turned into a howl, long and deep, echoing through every ship's comms, not as a transmission, but as raw vibration. Enemy crews shivered. Some covered their ears, though no sound existed in the vacuum. The Allied soldiers widened their eyes in disbelief. They had heard stories of this sound, whispers told in barracks, legends passed from one generation to the next. A sound that was not just noise, but a warning, the howl of a human warship. Reinar felt his knees weaken. Memories flooded back. He had once stood on the bridge of a cruiser beside a human dreadnought. He remembered its engines howling like a beast. Shaking the very stars, he remembered enemy fleets breaking before it, and allies roaring in hope behind it. That same sound now clawed its way through the void. He whispered with trembling lips, "It's them. It has to be them, on the orbital station." The crew leaned close to their flickering screens. A faint silhouette appeared, cloaked in darkness. It was massive, larger than anything they had left in their fleets. Its outline was jagged with scars, its hull marked by battles long forgotten. Slowly, deliberately, it moved forward as if waking from eternal sleep. The commander's hands shook as he gripped the rail. "By the stars," he muttered, "it's human." Panic rippled through the enemy fleet. Officers shouted over one another. "Admiral, readings confirm a warship-class vessel. Its design matches ancient human dreadnoughts." Kravos bared his teeth, fury mixing with unease. "Impossible. Humanity is finished. They abandoned these allies long ago. This must be a trick." Yet even he could not deny the chill running down his spine. The howling engines seemed to claw directly into his heart. The warship continued its slow emergence from the void. Its lights flickered to life one by one like the eyes of a predator. Weapons arrays powered on, glowing faintly against the dark. It did not rush. It did not need to. Its very presence shifted the balance of the battlefield. Allied crews gasped. Enemy soldiers trembled. For in the darkest hour, a myth had stepped out of shadow on the ground. The civilians heard the distant vibration growing stronger. Many did not understand what it was, but they felt the air change. Hope sparked like fire in dry grass, spreading from one whisper to the next. "The humans are here," someone cried. "The humans have returned." Soldiers gripped their rifles tighter, their eyes burning with life once more. The enemy fleet still prepared their strike, but their confidence faltered. Kravos shouted, trying to hold control. "It is only one ship, one. Do not lose your discipline." His voice echoed across comms, yet no conviction filled it. Deep inside, he feared what he already knew. For one human warship had once turned the tide of an entire war. The allies on the station listened to the engines howl and felt strength return to their tired hearts. The commander raised his head high. "Hold fast," he declared. "Do not break." "Humanity has not abandoned us," his words were shaky. But the fire in his eyes told a different story. The shadow in the void drew closer. Each second the hum became sharper, stronger until it was undeniable. A warship, ancient but alive, scarred but unbroken. Humanity had returned to the stars. And for the first time in weeks, the enemy felt fear. The warship's return? The void split open as the shape emerged in full. It was no fragile craft, no desperate refugee ship, but a giant of steel and fire. The human warship glided forward, its hull scarred with the marks of ancient battles. Each wound told a story of wars fought and survived. Its engines howled like a beast freed from its cage, echoing across the battlefield. For the Allies, it was like watching a god rise from darkness. Crews on the station cheered through their tears. Soldiers on the ground dropped to their knees, pointing skyward. Children who had been crying moments before now stared in wonder. A single name spread from voice to voice, trembling with awe. Humanity. Captain Reinar stood outside the shelter. His chest heaved as he stared at the monstrous silhouette. His old eyes filled with fire once more, he whispered, "I knew it. I knew you would return." Memories of battles long ago flooded back. The same howl of engines, the same promise of salvation. Only now it was even louder, even more terrifying. But for the enemy, it was not awe, it was dread. Admiral Kravos felt the weight of the ship's presence press down on his heart. His officers hesitated at their stations, claws shaking over their controls. "It cannot be," one muttered. "That ship—" "It should not exist anymore," another officer whispered. "Admiral, our scans confirm it. This is a human dreadnought." Class designation lost to history, but unmistakable. Kravos slammed his fist into the console, his rage masking his fear. "It is one ship," he roared. "One, and we have a fleet of hundreds. Crush it before it rallies the weak. Show the galaxy that humanity is only a shadow of its past." His words rang hollow, and he knew it. For deep inside, he remembered the last time his people had faced such a vessel, and the nightmares it had left behind. The human warship did not rush into the fight. Instead, it advanced slowly, deliberately. As if daring the enemy to come, its lights blazed one after another, casting sharp beams across the void. Its weapon banks unfolded like wings, cannons glowing faintly, preparing for release. To the Allies, it looked like a protector. To the enemy, it looked like death itself. Inside the warship, human voices spoke with calm certainty. "Target lock established," one officer said. "Weapons at full charge," the captain, unseen to the galaxy, gave a simple order, his voice steady, his will unshaken. "Let them remember." The first shot tore through the darkness. It was not just a weapons blast, it was a roar, a declaration that humanity had returned. The beam cut across the enemy line, shredding through 3 destroyers in a single strike. Their hulls burst apart, fire spilling into the void. The soundless explosion painted the battlefield with light. Enemy ships panicked. Formations broke. Officers shouted in disbelief, "Impossible! How can one ship carry that firepower?" Others cried, "It was supposed to be a myth." Admiral Kravos tried to restore order, screaming into his comms, "Hold the line, regroup, do not falter." But his words drowned beneath the howl of the human ship's engines as it prepared another volley. On the orbital station, cheers erupted. Officers who had moments ago prepared to die now shouted with renewed courage. "It's real, it's human, they're fighting for us." The commander stood tall, gripping the railing. "Signal to all surviving ships," he ordered. "Rally behind the human dreadnought, we are not finished yet." Down on the ground, soldiers pounded their fists against their chests. Civilians shouted in joy. The children who once wept now laughed. Pointing at the streaks of fire in the sky, Captain Reinar raised his weapon and shouted to his people, "Stand firm. Humanity has returned to the fight." His words lit fire in their hearts. The human ship fired again, this time a spread of glowing projectiles that ripped through enemy cruisers. Each blast struck with surgical precision, tearing apart the fleet that had once thought itself unstoppable. Where the warship's fire touched, the enemy burned. Yet the dreadnought was not just a weapon of destruction. It was a symbol. Every Allied heart beat stronger. Every soldier fought harder. Even as wreckage rained down, the Allies pushed back. The tide of despair began to turn. Admiral Kravos gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his scaled skin. He could not deny the fear in his crew's eyes. "Focus fire on the human ship," he commanded. "Bring it down or we are lost." Enemy cannons lit the void, unleashing a storm of fire. But the human dreadnought endured. Its shields flared bright, its engines roared louder, as if mocking the enemy's efforts. The warship turned, its cannons glowing brighter than ever before. Its howl grew deeper, stronger, shaking even the Allied ships beside it. Then, with one colossal strike, it unleashed a storm that split the battlefield apart. Dozens of enemy vessels were torn asunder. The void blazed with their destruction. Silence followed for one brief moment, then came the whispers, spreading across every surviving ally ship, across every colony shelter, across the entire battlefield. The humans are back. The howl of fury. The battlefield shook under the roar of the human warship. Its engines howled like a living beast, a cry that carried across the stars. To the Allies, it was the sound of hope reborn. To the enemy, it was the sound of death. The dreadnought surged forward. Its massive guns unleashed fire with relentless fury. Beams of light tore through enemy cruisers. Torpedoes streaked like falling comets, and railguns hammered with thunderous power. Each shot found its mark, tearing holes in the once proud fleet. Ships that had mocked the Allies only moments before now burned and shattered in silence. On the orbital station, the crew watched in awe, their monitors lit with fire from the destruction. "Look at it," one officer whispered. "It fights like the stories, like the legends," another shouted. "They will never defeat it." "Humanity has returned," the commander, once weary and broken, stood tall, his voice carrying new strength. "Rally behind the dreadnought, strike with it, fight with it. We are not alone anymore." Allied ships, battered and failing, began to regroup. They formed new lines behind the human vessel. Its presence was like a shield. Drawing courage into every pilot, they fired with renewed energy. Their shots no longer wild and desperate, but sharp and coordinated. The battlefield, once lost, was turning. Admiral Kravos watched in disbelief, his claws dug into the console, his eyes wide with a fear he refused to admit. "Impossible," he growled. "It is one ship. One ship cannot do this." His officers exchanged nervous glances. Their screens showed wave after wave of their comrades falling. "Admiral," one stammered, "our losses are climbing rapidly. Their weapons are cutting through our defenses as if they were nothing." Kravos bared his teeth. "Then fight hard or fire everything, do not falter, or I will tear you apart myself." The enemy fleet obeyed. Their ships turned all fire toward the human dreadnought. Missiles streaked, cannons blazed, energy blasts thundered. The void became a storm of destruction aimed at a single vessel. Yet the warship did not break, its shields flared, glowing bright as they absorbed the barrage. Its hull trembled but held strong, and still its engines howled, as if mocking the storm itself inside the dreadnought. The human crew moved with calm precision. Their faces were grim but unafraid. "Shields holding at 60%, one officer reported. "Target solutions locked on enemy battleship," another voice called. "Ready to unleash full volley." The captain sat at the center, his expression carved from stone. He gave a single order, his voice low but unshakable. "Show them our fury." The dreadnought's weapons lit the void. A storm of energy erupted, beams slicing through the largest enemy battleships. Torpedoes streaked outward, detonating with blinding force. Enemy formations shattered. Whole sections of the fleet broke apart. The howling engines rose louder, echoing like a wolf's cry across the galaxy. On the ground, the civilians heard the sky thunder. They looked up and saw fire raining from above, not from their enemies but from their saviors. Soldiers raised their weapons and roared in defiance. Children laughed through tears. "The humans are winning," voices cried. "The humans are fighting for us." Captain Reinar raised his fist high, shouting with every ounce of strength, "Stand tall. The tide is turning." The enemy's arrogance collapsed into panic. Captain shouted over comms, "Fall back! Fall back!" Others screamed, "Their firepower is beyond measure." "We cannot stand against it." Admiral Kravos tried to hold his fleet together, but fear was stronger than his commands. The sight of the dreadnought tearing apart their might broke their spirits. Still, the warship pressed forward, its howl growing louder, its weapons glowing brighter. Each strike seemed fueled not only by human technology, but by rage at being doubted, rage at being forgotten, rage at seeing their allies abandoned and broken. The howl carried that fury, and every enemy who heard it felt their courage dissolve. On the Allied station, the commander clenched his fists. "This is not just a ship," he said. "This is vengeance. This is justice." His words spread through the Allied channels, rallying every last fighter to the cause. Together they surged, following the dreadnought into battle. Admiral Kravos stared at the battlefield with hatred burning in his chest. His victory was gone, his fleet was crumbling, and all because of one ship, one human warship that refused to die. He hissed through clenched teeth, "I will see it destroyed, if it is the last act of my life." But as the dreadnought howled once more, brighter and stronger than ever. Even Kravos felt the truth clawing at him. Humanity had returned, and they had come with fury. Turning the tide, the battlefield was no longer the enemy's stage of triumph. It had become a storm led by the howling engines of the human dreadnought. Fire burned across the void. Enemy wreckage drifted like broken bones through the stars, and the once crushing fleet of Admiral Kravos now faltered under the weight of fear. On the Allied station, the commander's voice rang out across every channel. "Stand with the humans, fight with them, push them back." His words lit a fire inside crews who had already accepted death. Suddenly their hands no longer shook. Their eyes no longer looked for escape. They looked only toward the dreadnought, the living beacon of their salvation. One by one, the battered Allied ships surged forward. Small frigates and broken cruisers, once scattered like prey, now formed a wall of defiance. They fired alongside the human vessel, their shots sharp, their maneuvers bold. The presence of the dreadnought gave them strength. Where they had faltered, now they pressed. Where they had broken, now they united. The human warship led them like a shepherd leading a storm. Its cannons unleashed strikes that tore open enemy lines. Each blast cleared a path, and the Allied ships rushed in to deliver their own fire. Together they carved through the enemy formation, step by step, strike by strike. The tide of the war was shifting before their very eyes. Admiral Kravos screamed in rage, "Hold the line, close ranks! Do not let them through." His words fell on deaf ears. The enemy captains had once mocked the Allies, but now they trembled, watching their comrades fall. "Admiral, we cannot hold them," one shouted. "Their firepower is overwhelming. They fight like demons," another voice cried out. "The dreadnought leads them. It is unstoppable." Kravos slammed his claws against the console. "Then focus fire on the human ship. Break it and the rest will fall." Cannons roared across the void. Every enemy weapon turned toward the dreadnought. But the Allies answered in kind, throwing themselves into the line of fire. They interposed their fragile hulls, shields flashing as they absorbed strikes meant for their savior. On the Allied station, the commander's voice shook with pride. "Protect the dreadnought at all costs. Humanity fights for us. We fight for them." His words echoed through the Allied fleet. Pilots gritted their teeth and charged. Even ships on the verge of collapse rammed into enemy vessels, sacrificing themselves to buy the dreadnought another second. Another volley. On the ground, civilians watched the burning sky with wide eyes. For the first time, the fire raining down was not only terror, but also salvation. Captain Reinar lifted his rifle high, shouting, "Do you see? They bleed. The enemy bleeds." His voice carried through the shelters, igniting courage even in the weakest hearts. Children clutched their parents and whispered, "The humans are winning inside the dreadnought." The crew remained calm. Shields at 40%, but holding, one officer reported. Enemy battleship cluster locked, ready to fire. The captain's eyes glowed with determination. He gave his order with steady resolve. End them. The dreadnought unleashed a storm unlike any before. Its cannons blazed, beams cutting through the enemy battleships in brilliant arcs of fire. Torpedoes streaked forward, detonating into infernos that swallowed entire squadrons. Railguns hammered through the remnants. Each strike was precise, merciless, unstoppable. The howl of its engines rose again, a sound so fierce that even machines seemed to tremble. Enemy formations shattered. Fear spread like infection. Captains broke ranks. Ships fled in desperation. "Admiral, we cannot hold them." "We must retreat," one cried. Kravos roared in fury. "Cowards, turn back and fight. Do not disgrace our fleet." But his commands no longer held power. The fear of the human warship had broken their spirit. On the Allied channels, cheers erupted. "They're falling back, they're breaking," voices shouted. Pilots who once prepared to die now surged forward, chasing the retreating enemy. The commander clenched his fist, his eyes wet with tears. "We are winning," he whispered, "by the stars. We are winning." Kravos stared at the burning wreckage of his once proud fleet. Hatred burned in his chest. Hatred not just for the humans, but for the terror they carried. He snarled, "This is not over. No single ship will end me. I will destroy them with my own claws if I must." Yet deep inside, even he could not deny the truth. The warship had broken him. The dreadnought pressed on. Its engines howled louder, its guns fired brighter. The Allies followed in its wake like wolves behind their alpha. For the first time in this war, hope outweighed despair, and as the enemy fled into the shadows, One truth rang clear across the stars. Humanity had not been forgotten. Humanity had not abandoned them. Humanity had returned to turn the tide. The dawn after darkness. The stars burned with the light of wreckage. The battlefield was littered with broken ships, enemy vessels torn apart, their flames drifting like dying embers in the void. Among them the human dreadnought stood tall, scarred but unbroken, its engine still howled. Not in rage now, but in victory on the Allied station. Silence filled the command deck. Then slowly it broke into cheers. Officers cried out with joy, slamming their hands against consoles, hugging one another. For hours they had believed death was certain, yet now life filled their hearts. The commander wiped tears from his weary eyes and whispered, "We live because they returned." His voice trembled, but his spirit was steady across the fleet. Battered ships blinked their lights in salute. Old frigates and crippled cruisers flashed signals toward the dreadnought. A simple message carried across the dark. "Thank you," pilots spoke through cracked comms. "We will not forget humanity fights with us still." For the Allies, this was no longer just survival, it was rebirth. Down on the colony, the people poured from their shelters. They stared at the sky where flames still burned. Civilians wept openly. Soldiers raised their rifles and shouted in triumph. Children danced, pointing at the warship above as if it were the sun itself. Captain Reinar stood at the front, his old armor battered, his eyes wet with pride. "You came back," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You came back when we needed you most." In the void, the enemy fled. Admiral Kravos sat in the shadows of his shattered flagship, his claws trembling as he watched his once mighty fleet scatter. Hatred burned in his chest, but it was smothered by fear. He had seen what a single human warship could do. He had felt the howl tear through his spirit. He whispered bitterly, "If one ship can do this, then what happens when the rest arrive?" His words carried no triumph, only dread. The dreadnought floated in silence for a moment, its lights glowing faintly, its hull scarred and bruised. But there was no weakness in its presence. It was a symbol carved in steel, a promise that humanity had not been erased. Its crew moved with quiet purpose, their captain staring into the stars with steady eyes. "Transmit message," he ordered, his voice calm, resolute. "To every Allied world, let them know humanity has returned. Let them know we will not let the darkness claim them." The message carried through subspace, racing from system to system. Across distant colonies, across broken fleets, across frightened planets, the word spread like fire. The humans have returned, hope, long buried, erupted once more. Where there had been despair, now there was light. Back on the colony, Captain Reinar gathered his people. His voice rang across the square as he shouted, "Remember this day. Remember that we were not abandoned. Humanity stood with us. Humanity fought for us," his people roared in answer. Their voices echoed into the night. For the galaxy, whispers began to grow. In shadowed councils and enemy halls, leaders trembled. The name of humanity, once thought faded, was spoken again with fear and respect. Tales spread of the dreadnought that rose from the void, a single ship that broke an empire's fleet. Some called it a ghost, some called it a demon, but all agreed on one truth: humanity had returned. The Allied survivors stood together in orbit, their broken ships circling the dreadnought like moons around a planet. They were scarred, they were wounded, but they were no longer beaten. The presence of the human warship was proof that the fight was not over. As the flames of battle died, dawn rose over the colony world. The sun lit the horizon in gold. The people looked upward, their hearts lighter than they had been in years. Children pointed to the sky and whispered, "The humans came back for us." And in that whisper lay the seed of a legend, one that would never die. The dreadnought turned slowly, its engines rumbling as it prepared to depart. It would not rest, not while darkness still lingered. As it vanished once more into the void, the howl of its engines carried a promise. Humanity was watching, humanity would rise again. And for the first time in a long time, the galaxy dared to hope.